Hi, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the colleagues who are tuning in online for this panel. We will be starting. My name is Frederick Matisse. I'm the head of division of the Development Cooperation Directorate in the OECD, and I'm here very much welcome you to talk about the important topic of small island developing states, or SIDS, as we call them. As we all know, SIDS face unique vulnerabilities and development challenges based largely on their remote geography, small land masses, limited populations, and vulnerability to climate change and other external shocks. I'm very happy to be here today to be launching some effectiveness principles tailored to the specific situations to SIDS. We have a beautiful publication on that. My colleague Eric Benzel will talk you through those principles in a little while, and we will have a discussion with a very interesting panel after this. And with that, we are first going to listen to two high-level opening remarks. The first one will be by Dr. Walton Webson, the chair of AOSIS and the permanent representative of Antigua and Barbuda to the UN, followed by Rebecca Fabrizi, who is the UK Special Envoy for SIDS and the head of the Caribbean and SIDS Department at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. And with that, Dr. Webson, I would like to invite you to come to the stage and do your opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, good evening, those folks online, and to everybody in the hall. It's a great pleasure to be here in person and to be with you for this very important meeting. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ministers of government, senior and other government officials, United Nations representatives. The international community is still in the mix of confronting a multiplicity of challenges and crises, some of which are unrelenting. Extreme uncertainties surrounds what major features of our lives and livelihoods and the global order will change permanently, or indeed already have changed with the crisis that confronts us. My friends, yet a few basic facts are sure. The pressures faced by small island developing states, SIDS, are the greatest, and there is still a need for swift and decisive action to protect our small, vulnerable islands. Without much doubt, Excellencies, the COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, the economic crisis, and global unrests are the biggest stress test that we as small islands have ever faced. We started on a course almost 2 years ago together with you, our developed partners and friends, in putting forward bold ideas on what can be done to assist small island developing states in recovery from the crisis that we faced. What we envisaged 2 years ago when we started this journey was a set of principles that are shared responsibilities, homegrown, easily understood, easily implemented, and easily tracked. What we did then, and what we did not envisage at that time, however, was that the support showed to small island developing states would be on such a level, and for this I say to you, thank you. Your support was and has been tremendous and welcoming. I recall at the start of Antigua and Barbuda's tenure as chair of the Alliance of Small Island States, I said, and I would like to quote, multilateralism and securing the support of the international community are more critical now than ever. Less small island developing states are swept into oblivion because of the many crises we are facing, unquote. Today, my friends, I can say that multilateralism is real, and so is the support being provided to us, small island developing states. These set of principles we are launching today complements the Paris Declaration and other aid instruments. Official development assistance does work. This is why I am encouraging all developed partners and others in a position to do so, to recommit to providing development aid to small island developing states. ODA and other types of aid helps our countries to achieve the SDGs, the goals of the Paris Agreement, and to fully realize the Samoa pathway. Let me be clear, my friends. This is just one part of the support small island states need or require. While the principles speak to a multitude of areas under the such as economic, environment, and social pillars, they cannot be seen as the end. There are tremendous work remaining ahead. With the members of the OECD DAC, we, small island states, expect to continue to partner on matters relating to the adoption and implementation of the MVI, the Multi-Vulnerability Index. The operationalization of the loss and damage fund that we fought so hard for in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Looking ahead, the fourth SIDS conference that will be hosted by Antigua and Barbuda in 2024 is another milestone. I expect that we can showcase tangible examples and results of how these principles are improving the lives of individuals in small island developing states. And I am eagerly looking forward to a major announcement by the AOSIS and OECD DAC at that fourth conference in 2024, based on the outcome of the recently established mechanism for a roadmap to guide us through. Whilst no one can yet predict whether COVID-19 itself or the damage it has done to our economies and livelihoods, or the war in Ukraine with its global effects will provide the lessons for the future multilateral responsibilities and assistance to small island developing states, we do know that the history will offer a sober and somber reminder that the most vulnerable of countries might be left wanting, or as we say, left behind. And for that, history may never forgive us. So, my friends, please let us ensure that we can adhere to these principles and allow this process to refocus and retool, rethinking, and offer unwavering development support to small island developing states. As this is also my final statement before a large group of partners as you are, as in my capacity as chair of AOSIS, I say to all of you, thank you. Thank you to all of you for your unwavering support during Antigua and Barbuda's 2 years, only 2 years, of our chairmanship of AOSIS. It seems to me sometimes like it's 4 years. The accomplishments that we have achieved with your help stands out. This might be my last official event as chair, but it is certain not the last time that you would hear from Antigua and Barbuda, and I want to assure you it's not the last time you will hear from me. I intend to continue to work with you. I intend to work with you through to the 4th SIDS conference. I intend to be your partner and to work with small island states as we change the dynamics and change the paradigm and present a brighter future. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Webson, for your encouraging words of support to the principals, as well as outlining a strong ambition ahead of the 4th International Conference on the SIDS in 2024, as well as your fantastic personal engagement and all of that. With that, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Rebecca Fabrizi, who is a UK Special Envoy for SIDS.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Frederick, and thank you to everyone who's joined us here today in person and online. I'm really, really happy to be here for the launch of the Principles for Improving Development Impact in Small Island States, and really pleased that we have this lovely brochure as well to show all of you today. I'd really like to thank our co-chairs, Canada and AOSIS, and also thank you so much to Antigua and Barbuda for your really very dynamic chairing of AOSIS over the last 2 years, and all the work you've done, which I think has been fantastic. So I know that we're going to miss you in that role, but you're not really stepping back from the stage because of your generous offer to host the UN SIDS Summit in 2024. So I foresee that we're going to be working closely together on that as well. I'd like to recognise the support that we've had by our colleagues from the OECD, from UN OHRLLS, UNDP and DISA colleagues over the last 2 years as well in developing the principles. We all know that small island developing states have got this unique combination of climate and economic vulnerability that undermines their resilience. And you can really see that when you travel, people from the SIDS, you will know this very well. I see it traveling to SIDS. I was recently in St. Lucia and talking to politicians there, and the Prime Minister expressing his concern at their rising levels of debt since the pandemic, and the fact that they will borrow to create infrastructure, and then heavy rains come or hurricanes destroy infrastructure, and then it needs rebuilding, and that requires a repeated borrowing to build the same things over and over again, which makes the states increasingly vulnerable. So we see this real interplay between the climate vulnerability and economic vulnerability that make it really difficult to move on and become more resilient. And that's why the international community determined that SIDS are a special case for sustainable development. The situation is urgent. We know that there are some SIDS that may even disappear during this century due to rising sea levels if we don't work on a mitigation, and others are facing worsening extreme weather events all the time. So the low capacity of small state systems, narrow economies and diseconomies of scale, really high trade dependence, high disaster risks, make SIDS, on average, the most vulnerable states globally. And UNCTAD found that SIDS are about 35% more vulnerable on average than their developing peers. And the vulnerability has been thrown into sharp relief by COVID-19 and climate change, and also by the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the increasing prices of fuel and so on that have really affected SIDS. And in 2020, SIDS GDP on average dropped by 6.9% compared to 4.8% in other developing countries. So in the UK strategy for international development commits us to work for climate and economic resilience in SIDS through programs and also by championing SIDS issues on the international stage. And our promise to SIDS is to work for reforms that make international systems fit for purpose for vulnerable states. So improving the quality and impact of aid is one very important area for change. And in this session, we will hear from our SIDS partners about some of the issues they face directly from them. We'll hear how improving the quality of aid is going to make a real, tangible difference to these islands and to their communities. So the UK shares these priorities, SIDS priorities, and understands that there are fundamental threats to their existence. And that's why we're really proud to have been part of this process to benefit SIDS by improving quality and effectiveness of aid. The principles respond to SIDS challenges on aid quality and propose positive changes. But most important to the success is going to be awareness and also uptake of the principles. So we're looking forward to working with you to take forward the guidance and to embed it in our development partnerships. The road towards the 2024 SIDS Summit is really an opportunity for us all. So the UK will be championing SIDS issues right through to the summit and beyond. And we want to be able to point at some really tangible progress at the summit. We must engage and implement the principles and lead to better development outcomes for all of us. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fabrezi, for this good overview, as well as taking the lead and developing these principles. With that, I will ask my colleague Eric Bensel, who works in the Development Cooperation Directorate of the OECD, to come to the stage. And he has the impossible task to explain all the principles in less than 5 minutes. And we have some copies that we are happy to distribute. They will also be made available on our website to look more in detail. So, Eric, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Frederick, and good morning, everyone. Let me just reiterate that I'm speaking here today really on behalf of a multi-stakeholder effort. So I participated in a joint virtual secretariat composed of the OECD, where I work, and 3 UN bodies. And we were serving a technical advisory group composed of SIDS, bilateral cooperation donors, and multilateral institutions. So once again, it's really a multilateral effort and partnership. And allow me to also acknowledge and appreciate the contributions of Canada, the UK, and AOSIS for their leadership and, of course, the resources that they put behind this work. I won't go through the long laundry list of vulnerabilities in SIDS. Our distinguished speakers before me have already done so, but that was really the starting point for this work. I believe you will all agree with me that there's a growing international recognition of the various vulnerabilities that SIDS face. So, of course, climate impacts and the small size and limited capacity in SIDS, their geographical remoteness, but also the high levels of debt and difficulties in accessing finance. That was the starting point, as I said. And so the objective of this work was to find a way to address them more effectively. So this work, and I'm quoting here from the document, was intended to complement and build on existing agreements and frameworks by providing concrete and actionable advice to development stakeholders, with the ultimate objective, of course, to accelerate inclusive, green, and sustainable development in SIDS. So the document has been broken down into 2 large sections: the focus areas and the effective delivery of support to those areas. So you'll see here on the screen a list of 17 focus areas. This is not intended to be exhaustive, of course. SIDS have to address many, many other issues, but these 17 focus areas are those in which, in our consultations, we identified as the priority areas. The section in the documentation which goes through these focus areas attempts to spell out the issue and end with practical guidance, both for cooperation providers and for SIDS themselves, because of course SIDS do have a role to play in their own development, and in fact should be the leaders driving those efforts. I should also point out that this is not intended to be a piece of academic research. It is, of course, underpinned with analyses and research over recent years, but the intention is really to provide quick and, excuse me, actionable, practical advice for those who are working in SIDS. So just to take a very quick example, access to concessional finance, that's something which has been repeatedly highlighted as one of the main priorities for SIDS. This section, which I think you'll see there under 1.7 and 1.8, it highlights that since SIDS are the most ODA dependent of all country groupings relative to other external financial flows, right up to the point that they graduate from ODA, efforts need to be made to wean SIDS off ODA sooner. For instance, by prioritizing those areas that will lead to sustainable development. As an example, prioritizing the collection of domestic revenues and building statistical capacity. I will attempt to go to the next slide. Yes, excellent. So the effective delivery, this is sort of the how. If the first part, the focus areas, were the what, effective delivery is the how. And of course, this is why we are here today at the Effectiveness Summit. Eagle-eyed viewers and admirers of the effectiveness agenda will recognize that this section is sorted by the 4 effectiveness principles. So country ownership, focus on results, inclusive partnerships, and then finally transparency and mutual accountability. The so-called SIDS principles are not a re-litigation of these effectiveness principles. It is the same principles. What we've attempted to do is articulate how they are applied to the specific context of SIDS. So how do they articulate in the very specific context of SIDS? Allow me to take an example, country ownership, the first and perhaps most important principle of effective development cooperation. How do we respect country ownership in context of such small administrations and limited capacity? So this section offers some solutions, recommending, for example, that partners scale to context and simplify processes, accepting that transaction costs will necessarily be higher in these contexts. And I think that that's a thread that runs throughout the principles, the document, that transaction costs are necessarily going to be higher throughout all of the different focus areas. So in fact, while it may be true that ODA per capita is highest in SIDS relative to all other country groupings, it's equally true that the delivery of basic public services is also excessively high in these contexts. Contexts that we must recognize are uniquely and particularly vulnerable. I will end there. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Just to say that, of course, we have copies right here. Please pick some up at the end of the session. And we intend to include the URL to the documentation in English and in French in the outcome document. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eric, for this very transparent overview. And if I can just underline what you said about this is not another piece of academic research. It is really a call to action for all stakeholders to work together and start implementing it. And that's why I'm very happy that we have quite a number of stakeholders in our panel. But before I ask those members to come up on stage, we're going to start with a video message from Ms. Rabab Fatima, who is the High Representative for the least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states, who unfortunately was not able to join us today. So let's listen to that video message before. Thank you. It should be coming up anytime. Yeah.
Small island developing states are a special case for sustainable development, owing to their multidimensional vulnerabilities. These vulnerabilities are recognized through a number of global frameworks: the Samoa Pathway, the 2030 Agenda, the Paris Agreement, and the Sendai Framework. However, persistent challenges remain when it comes to implementation. What is becoming increasingly clear is that SIDS need a different approach that can ensure better outcomes and help to forge more resilient and accelerated development pathways. The Samoa Pathway is now in its concluding years, and progress on achieving the SDGs is faltering. And so, we need to fashion an ambitious new agenda for the SIDS, a more innovative and result-oriented one. We must also mobilize and effectively use scaled-up development financing. Enhancing SIDS' access to concessional financing is an important piece of this work, and we anticipate that the development of the Multidimensional Vulnerability Index, which my office supports, will play a critical role in addressing this issue. We also need cooperation support that truly recognizes the special needs of the SIDS, cooperation that helps to build resilience and fund transformative development. This is why the work on increasing the impact of development cooperation in the SIDS is so important. Excellencies, my office, as a part of the virtual secretariat supporting this work, has long recognized the need to further highlight and prioritize areas of focus for development cooperation in the SIDS. On that note, we are working very closely with our colleagues in the OECD, UNDESA, and UNDP to support this agenda. Together with AOSIS, Canada, and the United Kingdom, as well as other development partners, we have helped articulate how the existing principles of effective development cooperation can be applied to the SIDS context. And we're happy to celebrate together this important milestone today with the launch of the guidance document, Improving Development Impact in Small Island Developing States, Implementing Effective Principles. Distinguished participants, dear colleagues, our work is, however, far from being over. As this document makes it abundantly clear, what matters now is action. The continued engagement of all of us here today will be crucial in taking these proposed actions forward. Together, we must ensure that all relevant stakeholders put in place the policy and institutional arrangements to make our collective sustainable development efforts a success. The 4th International Conference on SIDS is coming up in 2024. The preparatory process for that conference provides an excellent opportunity to mainstream these issues into the development of a new sustainable development agenda for the SIDS. My office stands ready over the course of next year to continue our work in this context, including with respect to coordination of the UN in this effort. On this, you can be assured of my unwavering support. Congratulations again to everyone who has contributed to the excellent report we launched today, and I look forward to working with you all to make these recommendations a reality. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And so this was our first stakeholder, the United Nations. And with this, I would like to call our other panelists on stage, starting with Mr. Josiah Girawuni Osborne, who is the Deputy Executive Director of the Pacific Island Association of Non-Governmental Organizations. I'd also like to call Ms. Miriam Sena Vieira, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of Cabo Verde. Welcome. Honorable Theofilusi Tiuiti, Minister of Finance of Tonga. And last, Ms. Björk Sanchar, State Secretary of International Development, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And apologies if I mispronounce any of your names. So I got two big questions for you, and I will ask you all to answer, and I will just go down from right to left. First question is, what is your vision for effective development partnerships and specifically in SIDS? What are 1-2 focus areas or proposed actions that you would think have the biggest impact in improving development cooperation and impact in the SIDS? And how do you think the principles should be taken forward, looking from your specific role in development cooperation, be it civil society, a bilateral development cooperation provider, or a SIDS partner country? I'd like to give you the floor first.
Your Excellencies, dignitaries, and a special acknowledgement of our SIDS leaders who are here, especially the Honorable Tufilusi Tiweti, the Minister for Finance in Tonga. In terms of our vision from a civil society perspective, I would like to highlight that the 2 focus areas that we are currently working on is basically on addressing vulnerabilities. And also on resource mobilization. For civil society, addressing vulnerabilities to the multiple hazards caused by, yes, the COVID-19. In terms of COVID-19, the various tropical cyclones that we have faced in the Pacific during the COVID-19 pandemic, and also with the ongoing slow onset of events on climate change. For many of us, the principles is a call to action. So for us, from the Pacific Islands, CSO, and I represent the Pacific Island Association of NGOs, which is a regional network in 24 Pacific Island countries and territories. The SIDS principles actually reinforces the ongoing efforts to actually address those vulnerabilities. Currently in the Pacific, we have our facility aiding local engagement within the civil society, which actually is a finance mechanism, anticipatory finance mechanism, prior to a disaster and also post-disaster. And also, we've also, as Pacific Civil Society, we've come together in October, in last 2 months, basically in terms of to push the loss and damage and to push through the need for accelerating climate finance. And we have come up with our own climate declaration, which includes a financing facility for civil society. We cannot compete with our governments for the same pot of funds, but we need to be innovative in how we fundraise to address that. Secondly, that's how we are saying about resource mobilization, Chair. And those are some of the things that we have done. For the FALE, the Facility Aiding Local Engagement, this is basically, it's currently being done in Tonga, Fiji, Vanuatu, and Solomon Islands. These are one of the disaster-prone areas, and it has actually facilitated how they've responded to the Hunga Tonga, Hunga Pai response. And in Fiji, it's actually how they responded to TCASA and to TCANA when you have those mechanisms in place, the finance mechanisms to support them, to support the people on the ground to move. Because during COVID-19, what we have seen that, yes, we have development corporations, but at times there might be a gap. There might be a gap in terms of how you respond to these disasters. It is the people on the ground that are actually reaching out, that are actually assisting those that are affected the most. Before government, before any support, overseas support comes in, we are already having those systems to mobilize on the ground. And this is something that we've done in the Pacific. Thank you for CSOs.
Thank you very much for this perspective of a civil society organization. Let me immediately go to the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of Cabo Verde, Miriam Sena Vieira. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. But before answering your question, I would like to stress the remarkable work that AOS is here, represented by Ambassador Webson, and then also UNDESA, UNOH, or LLS, and OECD, in partnership with the governments of UK and Canada, Norway, for putting forward the principles that we are launching now. That for us is a milestone for improving development cooperation in SIDS. Also to stress that they were prepared in a timely fashion manner, and that it constitutes an opportunity for international community to implement them now more than ever, considering the current global situation that we have now, marked by multiple crises that have been hardly hit SIDS. representing and causing as well setbacks in their development progress they achieved so far. I would like to say that all proposed actions are crucial, and they may produce also positive impacts when applied in an integrated and holistic manner. But I would say also the two main important areas that we have to focus is basically to bolster or to boost resilience to economic shocks. Saying that, that means that seeds need support in diversifying their economies, which means also preparing them for future shocks. Having also a possibility to reduce impact in their economies. This also would require not only adequate finance tools and effective means of implementation, but also to take approach of no one size fits all. Because seeds, we do have different realities, and then all the financial tools and instruments that will be mobilized has to also be adequate to each reality of seeds. And then another point I would like to raise here is to support climate action. And we must act now by facilitating access to climate finance, which is indispensable for sustainable development in seeds. Climate change requires also adequate response, which is climate action. And for seeds is a question of existence and survival. And the day before yesterday, I guess we had a panel where the civil society representative were there when he rightly explained that there is no development seeds if you don't tackle climate change. So the time to act is now, and then seeds have been sending SOS message over the years and yet still face burdens due to climate change. How many more SOS do seeds have to send in order to have a special treatment being realized, or to be more specific, how many SOS do we need to send in order to have urgent response to the threats that we face? COVID-19 pandemic was also a kind of wake-up call, and now we are facing one of the most shocks in seeds economy. The multiple crises exacerbating shocks to their realities are showing us that the time to act is now. And there is a need to have a more reliable development cooperation policies and approach in seeds. We do need also to see more commitments to become a reality in seeds. Samoa Pathway have put forward accelerate modalities of action, but we have we have to confess that we have resisted some progress since the adoption of Samoa Pathway, regardless the many conversation or dialogues, platforms around seeds issue, and also the multi-stakeholder partnerships platforms that also were created. But I think that we need more than that, and then the time is now. And we have to take advantage of improving development impact in seeds by implementing, of course, aid effectiveness principles and action, so that are already proposed in this document. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this clear call to action, and also for your call to not pick and choose any of the principles or the SDGs, for that matter. We have to do it all in an integrated manner. Honorable Theofilousi Tioiti, Minister of Finance of Tonga, the floor is yours. And if I can ask the following speakers to try to keep to 2 minutes, as we also want to open the floor. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'd like to also echo the congratulations to those who've been involved in developing the brochure that we've seen this morning and launched this morning, which is very comprehensive and also will help us all. I just want to put some regional context to the Our Pacific leaders adopted a 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent earlier this year in July. Strategy provides us with an overarching blueprint to advance Pacific regionalism for the next 3 decades, articulating the region's long-term vision on values and key thematic areas and strategic pathways. The strategy articulates the region's long-term vision, values, and thematic priorities to ensure a resilient Pacific region of peace, harmony, security, social inclusion, and prosperity. As a vision for developing partnerships in SIDS, I think partnership is based on mutual trust and respect. We in the Pacific have a number of vulnerabilities. Tonga is number 3 ranked by the World Bank Vulnerability to Climate Change Index. So the Multi-Vulnerability Index, MVI, is something we have been fighting for a while. And there is a United Nations resolution in 2021 that provides a mandate for a MVI to be finalized and adopted this year. The MVI should capture our economic, structural, and environmental vulnerabilities. So a focus area for us at this state is the addressing vulnerabilities, which most of us in the Pacific is something we really experienced on a frequently. So through the partnership, we could try to meet the 1.5 targets for climate change. We from the Pacific are vulnerable to climate change and the frequent occurrence of natural disasters, such as tropical cyclones, has further deteriorated our livelihood. As mentioned this morning, we still find difficulties in gaining access to some of the climate financing. So working together with development partners to honor the financing commitments is a priority and can help us. As we heard on Monday's session, that it takes around 3 years to collect the required data to lodge a submission for financing. So it will be something that I'm sure it's mentioned in the proposed actions in the brochure, which is very the reality in the small island states. Loss and damage were heavily discussed during COP27, and hereby urge all partners to continue the conversations and agree on our way forward. Trust is an important issue as well, and in the Pacific we are working very hard with to improve our country system, especially with the BFM system in doing the PIFA assessments of all our Pacific islands and trying to improve the existing BFM systems. So we'll try our best to also ensure that we collect and demonstrate the country system is working, and also to support what we have. I think the principles for ownership and results focus should be taken forward by using the strengthened existing systems via direct budget support. Using the existing systems, it supports the long term by ensuring systems and process capacity is strengthened with programs, better reflecting the reality on the ground, and ensuring that funds is provided at this pace. Another important issue is also I think it gives us the opportunities to further our engagement with civil societies and also with private sectors and other stakeholders within the country level to make sure that there is inclusion in not only the policy development state, but also at the implementation and also the monitoring of the implementation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for highlighting those issues. Ms. Björk Sanchar, State Secretary of International Development, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Norway. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and let me join the others here in congratulating you for a very timely report with relevant principles. the context and situation and challenges that SIDS face that makes this so timely and relevant have been well explained by my previous panelists. I won't dwell on that, but I will mention one thing, which is that while Norway is not an island, we have a lot in common as ocean nations, where we depend on the ocean for our livelihood, nutrition, wealth, and we do have many common interests in the international climate debates and climate issues. So Norway, therefore, wholeheartedly, we share the challenges and opportunities that are outlined in the principles that we are discussing today. So I'll just pick up on a couple of points that have been mentioned as well by previous speakers. The first is whether we have the right international system in place to be able to provide support. And we have seen, and there have been discussions around whether GNI per capita, which is what we normally use as a measure, whether this is a suitable measure to capture real needs of SIDS and other economies that are vulnerable to climate change and external shocks. So you may know that Norway's former Prime Minister, Erna Solberg, together with His Excellency Mr. Gaston Brown, the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, are co-leading the high-level panel of the Multi-Dimensional Vulnerability Index. So that's a complicated way of saying that that this panel is looking into whether we have the right criteria in place to be able to address the challenges that we are talking about that the SIDS face. So once this panel has concluded its work, Norway will be looking forward to further discussions with you, or the SIDS, the DAC members, OECD DAC, and multilateral partners like the UN, IMF, and the World Bank on how we can make good use of this new index that we will be receiving. We've also heard that better private finance is part of the solution, but we also think there's much we can do beyond financing, and that's well reflected in the principles that we are launching today. So building on all this good work that's been conducted in the recent years on more effective development cooperation in the SIDS, on how to better prepare for graduation from ODA, on improving data and analysis, on domestic resource mobilization, and on sustainable ocean economy, just to mention a few points. So Norway initiated, and we still co-lead, the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, where there are SIDS members as well. The panel has a clear focus on the particular challenges of the SIDS, and to follow up better on this, Norway is also now a formal observer in the Pacific Islands Forum. We do believe that the vulnerabilities of the SIDS deserve to continue to be high on the agenda in the OECD DAC, in the United Nations, in the various development banks, and in other fora. So that's also why we welcome the principles, because we do believe they will contribute to that raised awareness. So the discussion today is about SIDS in particular, but it is also part of a broader discussion that we are having in the development community and in the global community about how we promote and finance global public goods. So let me just end by saying that Norway is taking this discussion seriously. And last week, we appointed and launched an independent expert group that will give some advice on how we most effectively can align our efforts to address both global challenges and efforts to combat poverty. Thank you.
Thank you very much for outlining some very frank, specific challenges, but also highlighting the strong support from Norway and actually tackling those challenges. We're running a little bit over time, but I have a long list of colleagues who would like to ask some questions, comments, and I will ask them to do the impossible by limiting their remarks to 1 minute, so we can hear as many as possible. So let me just go directly. The first one I have on my list is Brett Jones, the Senior Policy Advisor of USAID of the United States. And if I can invite you to go to the stage on the side. Thank you. Maybe I already ask our next speaker as well, His Excellency Dr. Hussein Niaz, Secretary of the Economic and Development Corporation of the Maldives, to also go to the stage. So we
Okay,
can go.
well, thank you very much, and thank you for the very definite time limit of 1 minute. I will try and be extremely brief. I'm honored to follow this distinguished panel. I myself am a resident of Hawaii and a Foreign Service officer who's recently served in Pacific SIDS in Fiji, where I've met some of the panelists today. So I really do understand the problems that SIDS are facing. I wanted to stress a few quick things from the US that we very much look forward to the introduction of the SIDS principles here today. And we value our partnership with SIDS, especially on raising global ambition to accelerate energy transition and improve adaptation to climate impacts. Of June of this year, Vice President Harris launched the US Caribbean Partnership to address climate crisis. That's a mouthful, PAC 2030. And in September, President Biden hosted the first ever US Pacific Island Country Summit. There he announced over $800 million in new and expanded programs for the Pacific. Just to follow on what some of the colleagues said, we support multilateral development bank reform that addresses transboundary challenges. To address major shocks, we're also promoting use of deferment clauses and clarifying MDB policies for reclassifying countries by income or eligibility post-shock. And we support expanding the World Bank's Small Island Economies exception. So thank you very much again for the opportunity to underscore the importance of development cooperation with SIDS, and we're honored to be here today, and we look forward to moving from this discussion into actions with the principles. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the support of USAID, and also thank you for being very brief. Really appreciate it. Dr. Hussein Niaz from the Maldives, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to represent the Maldives here. In relation to the Maldives' resilience and vulnerability, I would just like to emphasize 2 points, 2 key factors. Firstly, we all know that Maldives is a country that is 99% water. Due to this, the health of the marine ecosystem is directly connected to the sustenance of our livelihoods and the survival of our people. Therefore, quick and urgent action is needed to encourage the development of regulations for the future of ocean-based economies. All major businesses in the Maldives depend heavily on the natural environment. Protecting biodiversity is a top priority for the Maldives because the 3 pillars of our economy, tourism, fisheries, and agriculture, depends on the well-being of this ecosystem. Including fisheries, tourism, and agriculture, even our homes are vulnerable to the effects of climate change. IPCC has made it clear that states like the Maldives will not be able to adapt to a world that warms beyond 1.5 degrees. Our shorelines are eroding at an alarming rate. Some estimates indicate cost of $8.8 billion to deal with this in order to address this. In the context of the current global challenges, we believe that no country can bounce back by itself. This is especially true for small island countries like the Maldives with extremely limited options locally. Thus, expanding networks and establishing linkages internationally are essential for our survival. And in the middle of the Indian Ocean, the Maldives stands on the front lines of climate change with over, as I said, 90% of land less than 1 meter above sea level. Rising sea levels threatens to submerge our islands. We saw what a tidal wave could do to our islands' lives and livelihoods during the 2004 tsunami. We have been trying to get access to funds internationally, but sometimes it is very difficult to access funds because of the basic information that we are required. So we believe that, genuinely believe that multi-vulnerable index is crucial for assisting small island development states such as the Maldives. In the long term, after MBI is approved, hopefully institutes will choose MBI over GDP and when providing financial aid. Therefore, we believe that MBI will help our country receive strategic financing. by launching the principle for improved impact in seats which specifically target each nation's unique characteristics, I firmly believe that my fellow seats communities will climb the development ladder with the support of the international financial institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Paul Wallace, Special Advisor of the Office of the Deputy Secretary from the New Zealand Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade.
Tēnā koutou, and thank you, moderator, and thank you to the excellent speakers and the panel discussion. I'd like to join others in thanking the co-chairs and those who have pulled together this excellent document, this excellent set of principles. Aotearoa New Zealand welcomes these principles, and we look forward to using them to guide our engagement with our Pacific partners, and we look forward to others doing so as well. Although we're not meant to pick and choose the principles, there are three that really resonated with us. The first is that we should be working at better understanding and measuring development progress, and in a way that takes into account unique vulnerabilities. This has significant implications on the scale and the structure of our engagement and our development financing decisions. And the multi-dimensional vulnerability index will be critical in this regard. So we look forward to the finalisation of this index and on the action of actually implementing it. The second is climate change, and in this I'd like to draw on my recent experience as a High Commissioner to Kiribati. The costs and the consequences of climate change are ever present and every day, and they have profound impacts on people's health, their livelihoods, their communities, and on their critical infrastructure. And these costs and consequences are being experienced by countries and peoples throughout the Pacific region. So we strongly support the principles' priorities on addressing vulnerabilities through support for climate action plans, promoting disaster risk reduction, climate resilient infrastructure, and facilitating access to finance. And finally, if I may, the third feature is listening and responding to It is about listening and responding to our partners using country-led approaches, but it's also listening and responding when our partners come together to express common objectives and aspirations. The 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent, which the Honourable Minister from Tonga has mentioned before, is an excellent example of this. And Pacific regional agencies play an important role in both supplementing and building technical capacity in Pacific countries. So we look forward to working with others, working with you all, and implementing these principles, turning them into action. Ngā mihi ki aohua katoa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Elson Martino da Costa, National Director for Management and External Resource Mobilization, Ministry of Finance, Timor-Leste. And we're running really a little bit out of time, so apologies to push to keep it short. Thank you.
Thank you, moderators. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very delighted to be here to give my very short intervention or sharing the experience. In terms of the seats, this occasion is very important for all of us here, especially for seats and also for GPDC, so that this forum can came up the mutual consensus for all of us here, so then we can take future considerations. To make this is important, from Timor-Leste, I'd like to point out a few things that perhaps it's really important based on Timor-Leste experience. Firstly, we'd like to continue to open inclusive dialogue with the all partners. Especially in our case, we have to open dialogue with all development partners. We call Timor-Leste and Development Partners meeting annually, also quarterly development partners meeting, and also development coordinations meeting, and then portfolio coordination meeting. This is the kind of the meetings, very open discussions to understand what exact that have been achieved, so then we can address the problem, and then we can solve those problems that we are facing. And also, we need to improve transparency and mutual accountability, because so that we can improve and produce our good informations and make the analysis, so then we can avoid and in terms of the fragmentations. And also the currents, as Excellency Minister mentioned about the PFM, is also the very essential. In case of Timor-Leste right now, we improve that PFM and make reforms that we get the support from stakeholder, World Bank, New Zealand, and other UN agency family. Fourth, improve the quality of the data. So we have 8 information management system in place. I believe that colleagues from Tonga, Solomon Islands also have that system, can very help in order to strengthen our information, so then we can share our information to make, to provide, to convince this information to our decision maker. Ladies and gentlemen, we know that managing aid financial flow is really essential. Therefore, in case of Timor-Leste, the government create the budget law to accommodate ODA to be part, so-called combined source budgets. The budget scrutinized by the parliament and also the state auditor. All this way, we are not guaranteed to external, to well-managed external. However, these provisions impact really meaningfully and accountable. To end of my this intervention, for sure we acknowledge that many more challenges are there. One is capability to mobilizing resources are very critical in terms of financing and human resource. That's, we need to enhance capability to address that. We need more collaborative. I thank you.
Thank you very much. The next 2 speakers are Sarah Hunt, who is the Policy Unit Director of the Development Cooperation in Africa Division and the Department of Foreign Affairs in Ireland. And right after that, I will ask Dirk Platzen, who is the Counselor Development of the Australian Mission to the OECD in Paris.
Thanks. Good morning, Ministers, Honourable Guests, Special Envoy. Ireland is pleased to have participated in the Technical Advisory Group, and we greatly appreciate the leadership of the United Kingdom and Canada, the commitment of the Alliance of Small Island States, and the steadfast work of our Secretariat, which has brought to fruition the task set by our development ministers in 2020. The launch of these principles is an opportunity to reaffirm both our commitment to working together and our intent to translate the principles into actions, solutions, and opportunities to learn how to deliver better responses. Today's launch is particularly timely as we move beyond the midpoint on the way to 2030 and await, as others have mentioned, the final report of the high-level panel on multidimensional vulnerability index and begin the preparation of the 4th International Conference on SIDS in 2024. Ireland will provide financial assistance to support the regional preparatory meetings, and in 2023 we also look forward to engaging in the preparation of the next SIDS programme of action and supporting the High Representative Antigua and Barbuda and our SIDS colleagues throughout this process. In 2023, Ireland will also publish our 2nd national strategy for supporting SIDS, and today in Brussels we begin our conversation with fellow islanders about the priorities for the next phase of our partnership. We look forward to a busy and productive 2023 and continued cooperation with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dirk Platzen from the Australian Mission.
Thank you very much, Frederick. I'm probably down to 30 seconds now. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to join others in thanking Antigua Barbuda for its leadership on the panel and as chair of AOSIS. And we're looking forward to working with Samoa as the next AOSIS chair. Australia has a deep appreciation of the unique challenges facing small island developing states, particularly from our long association with our Pacific Island neighbors. And I wanted to give a particular shout out to the many friends from the Pacific that made the long journey to Geneva to brace the winter here. Our region is enriched by the cultural, social, and economic ties binding Pacific countries. In identifying principles for improved aid impact in SIDS, it is critical to hear and integrate SIDS' own priorities. We know, for example, that AOSIS has identified climate change, sustainable development, and oceans as their priorities, and these priorities should guide our investments. We also have to recognize that SIDS have made important advances in environmental protection, gender equality, and improvements in social services such as health and education. But as we heard from many speakers today, significant challenges do remain. While the international community broadly accepts SIDS' unique vulnerability, as yet there is no agreed definition of vulnerability. And we can't measure what we don't understand. As a result, approaches to SIDS are inconsistent and often based on hard-fought exceptions, fueling a sense of long-term insecurity. Today is therefore an important opportunity to reflect on how improved understanding of vulnerability can improve aid impact in SIDS. And again, now also a particular thank you to the co-chairs, the UK and Canada, for their efforts. Lastly, if I may, Australia has currently launched 2 processes that will help us to respond better and make our aid more impactful. And that is a consultation process on a new international development policy, where we will listen to and respect the priorities of our partners, and also a review of our development finance, which presents an opportunity to increase the effectiveness, coherence, and scale of our existing sovereign and non-sovereign financing mechanisms. Lastly, Australia will provide in 22-23 an additional 1.4 billion in additional official development assistance over the next 4 years. With that, thank you very much, and thanks for your time.
Thank you. And I have one more speaker, and I hope I read as well, Pefi Kingi from Niue, who will make a 1-minute intervention. Thank you.
E wila kua la patata mai fasia ho la tawahi mata My added commendations for the production of this here document, because it's about me. However, there must be another that follows it, and it should contain the following. I also acknowledge my leaders from Fiji, Tonga, Aotearoa, New Zealand. One of the principles that may be missing is Indigenous knowledges. We have intel that you need, especially our nature-based solutions. The other foci that's missing for all of us is climate mobility, please, and especially according to the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration. The other, since we've been a little bit somewhat successful at COP27, would be loss and damages, and indeed uneconomic losses, our cultural losses, our assets that you cannot enumerate. It must be counted this time round. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for that expert group. On behalf of civil society, we dare you to be daring, because that's what this particular time period has required of all of us, is a reset of the way that we evolve, the way that we collaborate, cooperate, work together. Therefore, we'll be happy to be part of that independent group, expert group. Kia tūtanga loa e mawhala. May you have the best and most joyful of the season and the reason. Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much. The start of the question I did not expect, but thank you very much for that contribution. Unfortunately, we do not have time to go back to our panelists. I also did not necessarily hear questions. I think overall what I heard was a very strong support for the principles, some proposals for concrete actions, some made concrete commitments to take this forward and other actions forward. So I think this was very useful. We could probably spend another hour discussing And while this is not the beginning, it's definitely not the end. So I hope that this new milestone will accelerate some of the very needed discussions. I would just like to give the last word to Mr. Drew Smith, who is the Director General of the International Assistance Policy Bureau in Global Affairs Canada, who will maybe attempt to summarize the discussion so I don't have to do it later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't think I will attempt to summarize the discussion. I hesitate to even come up here following my South Pacific colleagues' last intervention. But I would just like to take this opportunity to thank everyone involved in putting these principles together, co-chair with the UK, the leadership of Antigua and Barbuda. And I would just like to say that this has very much been a team effort. It's been highly collaborative with our SIDS colleagues. And we really look forward to moving these principles forward. In terms of Canada and next steps, many of you might be aware that Canada has just launched an Indo-Pacific strategy. We've joined the partners in the Blue Pacific in September, so look forward to coordinating with colleagues in the South Pacific, as well as our ongoing engagement in the Caribbean through CARICOM and other bilateral arrangements, and our continued commitment to working in the sub-Saharan Africa, including African SIDS. So we very much appreciate the work that has gone into the principles. We intend to move them forward and disseminate them widely, and we hope others will join us in doing so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are running over time, so I will also not try to attempt to summarize this discussion. I think it was a very rich discussion. I would just like to thank once again the whole panel and all the speakers who spoke, and let's give them another round of applause. Thank you very much.